All right, we're a little early, but what I'm going to do very quickly is I'm going to write the rest of this. In other words, I'm going to say here, hours worked equals input hours worked, and I'm going to provide into that hours worked, hourly rate, equals input hourly rate, and I'm going to provide into that hourly rate. And again, because I'm a little anal about this, I'm going to line everything up like little soldiers. Now, look at this, if you would. This one's different. Okay? I'm not going to pass gross pay into here. I could do that, but I'm not going to. But what do I need? What does gross pay need? What? Yeah, it needs two parameters. What are they? What is gross pay? There you go. And then finally, when I go to output, notice I'm not setting that equal to anything. I'm not returning anything. All right? So for that, I'm going to literally put in what? First name, last name, hours worked. And I can put this over a couple lines. It's not going to hurt anything. Hourly rate. Gross pay. Okay, I think that's everything. All right, so I'll give you a second to put all that stuff in there. Don't run it yet because we have to make our changes in the actual functions to get it to work.
Do you not use a variable name in front of the output like the other ones?
No, because I'm not returning anything. I'm just going to be printing it.
Do you have to have a space between the parentheses and the semicolon, or does it matter?
Between here?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
And as I told you when we started on this, technically you don't even need the semicolon in there. All right? You should always put it in there, but technically if you don't, it still will work. So in just a second, we're going to add all that stuff in. Okay? So I'm taking for granted everybody's got these two done. I don't have to show those anymore. All right? You've got the code. These are, so now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are 6 different function calls. The first 1, 2, 3, 4 are only passing in 1 parameter. The 5th one is passing in 2 parameters. And the 6th one is passing in 5 parameters. All right? The first 5 out of 6 are all returning something. They all need a return statement. The last one is not returning anything. It does not need a return statement. All right? It is what's called void of a return. The reason I'm using that word void is when you work in other programming languages and you say the function doesn't return anything, you put the return type in as void. All right? So we've already got this one done. We got our first name. We got our last name. Those are all done. So what do we have to do in here? Well, we have to pass in hours worked. All right? And when we get all done, we have to return hours worked. And again, if you don't like typing all that, you could change every one of these hours worked to something like HW, correct? I'll leave them the way they are. But you need a return statement in there, and it should be out before the ending curly brace. The last thing we're doing is we're returning hours worked. Hopefully you can already guess what we'll do for the next one. We're going to put hourly rate in here, right there, and we're going to return hourly rate. All right? Again, we're doing pretty heavy stuff in here. All right? When we start next week, when we start on the actual JavaScript book, so please, as of Monday, bring your books. All right? But when we start on the book, I'm going to do something similar to this in every chapter. But instead of using payroll, because we kind of beat this to death, we're going to use another one that everybody gets. We're going to do a miles per gallon program. And we'll ask the user, how many miles did you drive? They say 300. How many gallons did you use? They say 10. And the program will figure out 30 miles per gallon. How? It'll take that 300 and it'll divide it by 10. Okay? And then we'll add stuff to it as we go into every chapter. All right. Why that? If you look up on the screen here for a second, we eventually, remember this? Remember when we did this site earlier? We're going to add to it. We've got the home page. We've got the about page. We've got the contact page. I believe we did all those already. We're going to add a miles per gallon page where we'll simply do it, all right, where we'll calculate that, and it'll come up and it'll say, how many miles did you drive? Well, 100. How many gallons did you use? 10. Boom. You could almost do that right now with what you've learned. All right, you probably could. And that's it. Then we'll do one that's a little bit more advanced, where we'll put in, notice it's in a form now, 100, 10, and we'll calculate, and we'll clear it. Then eventually we'll go down and we'll write it with jQuery. So if you leave it out, we'll give them error messages. If you put in something that's out of range, we'll give them different error messages. Once you put in something that's within range, there'll be no error messages. All right, we'll incorporate all of that stuff into a website. Everybody with me? All right, so that's what we'll be moving towards. So, everybody got this one done? All right, so I'm going to go to the next one. Again, I'll change this. I'll make that HR for hourly rate. And we'll say here HR. You have to change every instance of it then to HR. 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 If you leave one of them wrong, you're going to be screwed. Pardon my French, but you will be. And then return HR. Oops. HR. All right, so that's the next one. I have never in my life encountered somebody who's a programmer who said, I got into programming because I really love typing. It's just never happened. That's why usually you'll find people when they use their actual, or their formal parameters, these, they'll often, if they've got big names, they'll make them smaller like this. You don't have to do that though. If you'd all just stop typing for a second and look up on the screen. If I did this, if I made a mistake and typed in here hourly rate, okay, that would be wrong, okay? But the way JavaScript works is it would create a brand new variable right there. It would create a brand new variable that was called hourly rate. Okay, so let's say the first time I did it, it came in here and I put in hello, which would be stupid, but I did that. It comes in here and it fails. So it asked me to do it again. So eventually I put in 23. But guess what it returns? That hello. All right? So you have to make sure that if you're going to use a different name for your formal parameters, that you use that different name throughout, or you're going to get an error. You say, well, geez, then I'm always going to use the same name as, well, you can do that, but you'll end up doing more typing. And as I showed you before, when you do something like that, it could end up being confusing. All right. Now, do you remember for gross pay, I purposely did this. We passed in hours worked and we passed in hourly rate. What didn't we pass in? We didn't pass in the word gross pay, correct? So what that means is we're going to have to come into our gross pay routine and we're going to have to create our own local variable that's called gross pay. We'll set it equal to 0. But we passed in hours. I want to make sure I do it in the right order. We passed in hours worked and hourly rate. So we have to make a grand total of 4 changes. We have to add these 2 things. There's 2 of our changes right there. We have to add this. And then at the very bottom, we have to come back in and we have to say return gross pay. And guess what? I just found another error. Remember these variables? Remember these 2 things here? They're now local variables. Correct? Everything's a local variable. All right? So, I got 2 choices. I can pass those in and change them. I'm going to be lazy. I'm going to say, you know what? My final totals that were in here, these 2 things, I'm going to make those global. So I'm going to take those and I'm going to put them right here. All right, so I made tote employees and tote gross pay global. So I did not have to pass them in to the gross pay routine. All right. Now, if you don't do that, yours is not going to work. There's other ways you could have done it as well. All right. And you know, I'll tell you this. You're again, I can't make up stuff that's this good. Years ago, when I worked for the college I used to be at, we had some money in our travel budget. We actually had about $2,000. And I was highly encouraged by my boss, because I had never gone and traveled any place, to go to a conference. And I said, well, there's this kind of cool conference, and it's in Kansas City, Missouri, and it's on the C programming language. So he let me go. And he said, we did all the finances, and it only cost $1,000, so I had $1,000 left. I thought, well, I could handle that. And he's like, no, I'm going to let you take somebody else with you. So I took one of the other instructors with me. Reason I'm telling you this, we're there the first day. And there's 2 people there that are on a panel. And they're talking about local versus global variables and when you should make something global and when you should keep it local. You know, it's a very interesting discussion. It gets very spirited until one of them walks up and clocks the other one. That's how much people believe in this stuff. It's their livelihood. All right? So now we want to call output, and we've got to pass all 5 of those things in there. First name, last name, hours worked, hourly rate, and gross pay. So I come down to here, and I'm going to put them in. So, first name, last name, hours worked, hourly rate, and gross pay. That whole routine is done now. I'm not changing anything. There is no return statement in that program. Please look at the screen right now. It would be legal to write this, which means I'm returning nothing. You can do that. You don't get an error. It's redundant to do that. It's like if I said, hey, Evan, do me a favor, go over there and turn off those 2 lights. And he turned them off. And I looked at him, I said, hey, Evan, go turn off those 2 lights. He'd probably look at me like I had a screw loose, or else he'd say I already did. Do it again. That's basically what you're doing. You're being redundant. Because if you leave off a return statement, it's implied that you're returning nothing, which is what we want to do right there. This is the only routine out of the 6 or 7 that we wrote, all right, the only one that we did not put a return statement in. All right? Now, if you got all that done, you're not done. What didn't we handle yet? We didn't output our totals. So really, remember, at the bottom, we want to call output total payroll info, right? That's at the very bottom of main. But we have to pass into that total employees and total gross pay. No, we don't. They're global. Since they're global, we can just call this, and we can come down here to the very bottom, and we don't have to pass in anything. Does that make sense? Maybe you can start to understand. You say, you know what, I'm a programmer, hell with you. I'm making everything global. And there are programmers who program like that. I have worked with them. They typically don't last. Because you shouldn't do that. What you're doing by making your data global like that is you're exposing it to any and every routine in the program. All right? It's not the same thing, but like when you look at it this way, I know this doesn't happen. And let me preface this by saying I'm not a Trump guy. But the President of the United States is a public figure. I think we'd all agree with that. And even though it doesn't work this way, technically, what I should be able to do is go into the White House, ask if Donald Trump is there, and if he is, say, hey, I want to talk to you about education. Now, I know it doesn't work like that. I get it. But with him being a public figure, all right, at least back in the day when people didn't go around shooting other people and doing whatever, you could actually do things like that because he was public. On the other hand, if I decide, you know what, I found out where Tony lives. I don't know where he lives, but I found out where he lives. So I go over to his house, and it just happens, I'm not even going to knock, the hell with it. I look, hey, the door's unlocked. So I walk into his house, and I sit down, and I say, I want to talk to you about education. All right, even worse, it's before this class started. He doesn't know who the hell I am. He's probably going to call the cops, right? And what I'm showing you is the difference between things that are public and things that are private. When you make data public, then that data is global. When you make data private, it's local, so it's defined. And if data is local, meaning it's defined in a routine, and you want to be able to work with it in another routine, you have to pass that. So local data, if you want to use it between different routines, must be passed in as parameters. Global data does not have to be passed. All right, so the advantage of global data is what I just said. It doesn't have to be passed. The disadvantage of global data is unwanted side effects. Anyone can change it. All right. Now, hopefully you were able to do all that. Anybody need any of this stuff? Need me to move up or down or whatever? Did you all get it? All right. Because I'm done. When we get to the point where we're talking about arrays later on in the course, I'm going to come back to this program and we're going to rewrite this as an array. We're going to assume that our company has 5 employees. So we're going to run this program 5 times in a different kind of loop. You got a question?
If you pass in, say, the last name in the last name function, calling it ln, if you're in a different function, do you have to call it ln again?
No. The other thing, and that's a good question. The other thing I want to mention, because this is really important, okay? Let's say that I screwed this up. Everybody with me? So I came in here, and instead of putting it in that order, I put in gross pay, then hourly rate, then hours worked, then last name, then first name. Are you with me? That would have been totally legal to do that. But then down here, I put it in this order. Now it would think the gross pay that I passed in was now called first name. It would think that the hourly rate was now last name. See what I'm saying? Order matters when you're working with parameters. And as you'll see when we work on it, so does data type. All right? If I have two fields that I pass into a routine, one's a string and one is a number, and I pass them in as string number, but in the function I put number string, I'm going to get errors. All right? So data type also matters. All right? Hopefully you got something out of this, and when we actually start to go into it next week, you'll be like, oh, that's why he told us that. All right? But I thought it would make more sense to do it like this. Yes, sir.
Under the while keep going, where we have the functions and inputs,
Yes.
should the F and then the L and then the first and last name, should that be lowercase? And then the hours worked and hourly rate?
Where you're talking about in here, correct?
Yeah, for the hours worked, last name and all that, the L is capitalized and the input, the function, but not
In here?
Yeah,
Okay, so that says input hourly rate, and down here it says input hourly rate.
well, I mean at the top,
Up here.
the H is capitalized, but then
Yeah,
the
that's a good question. This is called camel casing. All right, where if you've got three words put together like this, the first word is all lowercase, but each new word is uppercased. And you do that to distinguish between words. And the reason it's called camel casing is it's supposed to kind of look like the humps on a camel. Different languages handle this differently. Some languages say that variables should be like this, but if you're going to call a routine, it should look like this. In other words, the first letter of everything should be uppercase. See what I'm saying? Other languages say it's up to you, or it's okay for this to look just like this. The only difference between first name and input first name is the fact that input first name has parentheses after it, so you know that it's going to be a function. First name doesn't, so you know it's going to be a variable. I don't know if I answered your question or not. Okay. Any other questions? So tomorrow will be lab for the entire period. All right, by the end of the day on Monday, tell you what, Monday I'll try to only go till about 10 or so and give you 2 hours. So if you had any finishing touches on this wedding website, you'll be able to do that. But what I'm going to ask that you do on Monday is, everybody, and if I will, give you, if I have to, a flash drive, and I'll walk around and I'll ask that you take your folder with all your stuff on it, copy it to my flash drive. Make sense? All right. Yes.
For if you use Mobilize, do you want us to publish it?
Yeah, when you can publish it, and you can just create a folder on the desktop, call it wedding or something like that. Then when it says publish it, you'll tell it to publish, and you'll tell it to publish it to right there, and then it'll throw everything in there for you. All right. No other questions? I'm done then.